Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy. We've got a fun show for you today. It's episode 199. Tomorrow is our 200th episode of the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. Hard to believe, but we've got a fun one here today. Day 2 of Senior Bowl practice is in the books. Wednesday is over, so we're going to get into, first, Mr. Relevant. At the top of the show, our Vice President of Player Personnel here with the Eagles, Andy Weidl, is going to join the show. Quick conversation with Andy. Just kind of give us a little bit of his perspective of the Senior Bowl process. What is it like from the top down, looking at this All-Star game process, particularly down here in Mobile? We had Assistant Director of College Scouting, Alan Walking, on yesterday to really kind of take us from start to finish from an area scout standpoint, from their angle of this process. Well, now let's talk with Andy and kind of get his viewpoint on this whole week. So we'll talk with Andy at the top of the show and Mr. Relevant. After that, we're going to get into some of those things we've seen over the last couple of days. C-Mac and I in Draft Buzz, we're going to hit on some of the things we saw in the film room this morning. We got a chance to go back, watch some of the film from one of the one-on-one drills from Tuesday's practice. We'll get into some of the things we may have missed in yesterday's podcast after watching practice live. After that, pick 6. C-Mac and I will give our 6 players that stood out to us on Wednesday at practice. North and South team both took the field at Ladd-Peebles Stadium. We'll hit on that in pick 6. After that, C-Mac caught up with Notre Dame cornerback Troy Pride. We'll talk to him in our unofficial visit. And we've got a handful of questions from you at home in our draft mailbag. As always, the best way to support the show, keep us going, go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, wherever you listen. Leave us a rating, leave us a comment. It helps boost us up in the ratings. Lets more people find the show and learn more about what we're doing here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. All right, let's get to the top of the show here. I told you we caught up with Eagles Vice President of Player Personnel, Andy Weidl. The first thing I asked him, how has this changed over the last few years for him? Obviously, from an area scout, going on to Assistant Director of Player Personnel here in Philadelphia, now as the Vice President of Player Personnel. How has this whole process changed for him? That was how we started off that interview in Mr. Relevant.
It's time for Mr. Relevant.
Well, I started out as an intern with the Steelers, and I think coming up, being in the day-to-day operations, seeing how everything was done, soup to nuts in Pittsburgh, it was more of the pro side. Watching pro tape and see what's playing in the league, and developing a bank, data bank in your head. And then I became a scout for the NFS for the Saints, combine scout for 3 years, and that was a great job. And that it taught you how to put a height chart up, get the measurements, grade a Wonderlic test, evaluate the tape. Do the 40s, everything in the spring, soup to nuts, and then put a grade on a guy. And you had to go and present it in front of the team. So that were part of the NFS scouting organization.
Sure.
So I learned that, and then grew into an area scout, a regional scout. And
you were West Coast first, right?
I was a West Coast. I did the Northeast. I did the East. I did the South when I was at the Saints when I was a combine scout.
Right.
So been through a good part of the country.
Sure.
And I think, and just evolving and seeing more players. And then when the opportunity came here, it was pro side and college side. So, you just evolve. You just grow from it.
Sure.
You see what's playing in the league, what's playing at your place, what fits, what we do, and finding those guys that fit the culture.
So let me ask you now, we're down in Mobile.
Yeah.
How has the process changed for you, even just over the last couple of years, just going from, we'll say, area scout to assistant director of personnel to now as vice president of player personnel? How has the Senior Bowl process changed for you the last few years?
I think it's the big picture.
Yeah.
Used to have a position, follow it all week, and just watch that position and evaluate it. And you watched other things too, but that was your responsibility.
Yeah.
So now it's more of you sit in the press box and you try and see everything. You try to see a little bit of everything and focus on one group for a week, O-line and D-line, then the skill position, the corners, maybe another day, and just go through the running backs, receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends. So I think it's just more of the big picture is how it's evolved for me.
What do you miss about being on the road?
What I miss, I think when you go to a school and the people and the schools, the visits, it was like a continuing education. You go out and meet people in different parts of the country.
Sure.
And you learn about people, you learn about the area. And you're trying to figure these people out, these players out,
Yeah.
and developing relationships. The relationships are great.
Sure.
And we always talk about you got to develop trust, and that doesn't happen overnight. And it's about building relationships, and doing that and growing those relationships to the point that you have sources that you can go to.
Sure.
And so you know what the players are. And that's the key. That's the riddle. Is find out what we all get the film. Everybody in the league sees the film.
Yep.
And we all evaluate the talent, right? And some people may disagree on some things, others, but we all get the film. The one thing you have to do is you got to make sure you know who the person is when they walk through the door.
Sure. So I want to ask you now, like when you're an area scout, you get some FaceTime with those guys in the fall, going back to when they're on campus. You get to see them here, and you get to maybe see them again, maybe, because some schools I know are a little bit different in terms of the FaceTime you get with players, but in your role now, you may not get to have a chance. This is kind of the first impression. How has that changed for you over the course of your time as well?
Well, you would be excited. Guys you like in the fall, and they were coming here. You'd
Right.
be fired up to see them come down here and see how they perform. You perform well if you like them, and it was a piece of the puzzle. But now, yeah, it is. You're catching them now. This is some of these guys is the first time I've seen them.
Yeah.
I'm watching this week, and then we'll go back and really dive into the tape more on them and get to know them as we get into the combine and the top 30 visits and the pro days. So it's like a filter,
Yeah.
a filtering system.
Sure.
And you're trying to get down to find the guys that are Eagles.
From last year to this year, even just with the promotion up to vice president player person?
Yeah, I don't have Joe here by my side watching practice together. He was sitting down the other end of the press box watching it with his crew from the Jets. So, Hey, that's part of this business. It's change. The landscape's always changing, and he got a great opportunity, and I'm happy for him. Same time, you do miss him.
Sure.
I've worked with him for 13 years. But we got great guys here.
Yep.
We got a great group, and when that happens, opportunity presents itself for others. And we have a lot of young guys that are rising up, and we have a really good team. We always say we're a team within a team.
Sure.
We work together, we grind together, we lose together, we help each other out, we pick each other up, and I think that's so important to chemistry. And we work with other departments too. The
Sure.
analytics, they're a part of our team too.
Yeah.
Alec and his group. It's we work together with those guys, and they're part of our unit. And it's just good. Football operations as well. We're all in this thing together, and when your agenda's winning,
Right.
and everybody's focused on that and driving and pulling the same way, it's fun and it's exciting. And we've been in the playoffs the last 3 years, and we want more. We wish we were playing, obviously, but
No doubt.
we got a lot of determined people in there, and we're excited. So moving forward,
You get to make the final call on where you guys go for lunch and dinner before practice or after practice? Or
I let those guys go on the road. If they want to join me, they can. There's a couple of breakfast spots around here. I think it's the Ruby Slipper.
Yep.
Been down there.
Sure.
And but yeah, we'll do a meal together here and there.
Yep.
But it's a great week. I've always loved coming down here.
Sure.
Because it's a great chance to evaluate these players, compete against each other.
Yep.
I remember Aaron Donald coming down here. Nobody could block him.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's just, we're talking about that. Some of the great players that we've seen come through here and play down here. So it's a good time of the year, and it's always fun to be down here.
Yep. You're heading to the one of the most important parts of the week. You're heading over to interviews. We'll let you go. Andy, appreciate the time here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Fran. Always a pleasure.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, C-Mac, well, let's get into this here because we've got a lot to cover in this episode. We caught up with Andy Weidl earlier, obviously, in the last segment. Now it's time to cover what you and I saw, not today at practice, but let's just kind of review what we saw in the film room this morning. We went over, basically what happens is practice is, we talk about this, we're not ones that are going to kind of oversell what we take in, right? We just talked with Andy, and what did Andy say, C-Mac? He talks about how, he's trying to focus in on one position every day. You can't, as an evaluator, go in and just watch the whole practice and say, "Yep, I feel good about everything across the board."
Why not?
Because we don't have 18 sets of eyes. It's impossible to do. So you focus in on a position here or there, and then we go back and we watch the film and try and take in as much as we can. So we went to the film room this morning on Wednesday morning, and we watched 3 one-on-one sessions. That's all we had time for. Watched 3 one-on-one sessions from Tuesday's practice, and we started with the South squad, one-on-one offensive line versus defensive line. And early, I think the one clip, and it's a clip that has been spread around if you've been following along on Twitter, I know this clip went viral, was Javon Kinlaw had one really strong outside move. He was like a quick, I believe it was like a club rip move, really quick hands, was able to get upfield, get into the backfield to make a play. That was certainly one of the highlights. Javon Kinlaw considered a top 15, top 20 type player in this draft as we sit here today, out of South Carolina, a very stout player. But I'll tell you what, man, there were a couple other kids that really flashed and were really consistent from start to finish in this drill. And I think to me, C-Mac, it was Ben Barch, the Division III kid from St. John's, offensive tackle, 3 wins in a row against SEC players. Like, and if you're a small school guy, who I'm going to be honest, like, I watched him and I thought he was a nice player, but he wasn't a guy that was, like, physically dominant, overpowering everybody at that level. So I wanted to see what he would look like coming down here. First 3 reps, one-on-one, he goes Terrell Lewis, he goes DJ Wanham, and he goes Anthony Jennings.
All SEC guys.
All SEC guys. Win, win, win. Flew out of his stance, light feet. He played both tackle spots. He looked a little bit better at left tackle. I think when he moved over to right tackle later in the drill, that's where he started getting some issues. But those first 3 reps, I thought were really impressive. I thought that was really good to see for the kid from the small school.
That you bring up an interesting point because you've already scouted most of these guys, so you know what positions that are more natural, the ones that they played in, whereas some guys are coming to these all-star games and being put into new roles.
Yep.
And to me, I'm just trying to judge wherever they're at in the field, how are they looking at that spot?
Sure.
And that's something that you have to almost go back and when you look at their bios and do a little more research, then you kind of realize, all right, well, there's a reason he looked more natural left tackle than right tackle. And there are other factors and other pieces of the puzzle and bits of information that you're going to gather along the way to formulate, the final evaluation. But I wrote 3 names down of guys who I wish I had higher stocks on or talked to more.
Talked to more yesterday?
In yesterday's podcast.
I'm interested to hear what were the names.
Ben Barch is one of the 3 right there. Alex Taylor from South Carolina
Another
State.
small school kid.
So, yeah, but so fluid. You've talked about before his basketball background, where originally he was recruited to play college basketball and, one of those guys who was just so, he just so looks the part that, was told eventually recruited by the football coach to come over and play. Yeah. And that basketball background really, shows through with his ability to mirror, the quick feet.
His length.
Length is tremendous, and he knows how to use it to his advantage.
Yep.
That was the biggest thing that, guys are trying to get inside of him, and they have no chance. Guys are trying to fake moves to try and get him off kilter,
Correct.
to bend at the waist. He's not falling for it. Just a very natural mover on the outside.
Watching him on film, he was really raw, and he's had a few weeks to prepare for this event because the FCS season it ends. November. So he's had a month and change. He's had 5-6 weeks to prepare for coming down here to Mobile. And there were times where you mentioned it, defensive linemen, they'd flash their hands as if they were going to throw a move, get him to try and throw his hands. It didn't matter because he got his hands on, and once they were locked in, they were locked in. He had the feet to run the hoop. He was really impressive today. Yeah. I agree with you. I shouldn't say today. He was impressive this morning from yesterday. I don't know. I actually didn't watch the trenches today. You were the trench guy today for the most part. But Alex Taylor on film was impressive.
So those are the 3rd, Lloyd Cushenberry.
Yes, he's on my list as well.
From LSU, you mentioned Javon Kinlaw.
Yep.
Well, there was a rep where Cushenberry stoned Kinlaw and didn't give up any ground to him whatsoever. So I remember yesterday Logan Steinberg from Kentucky was one of my 3 players who I put a spotlight on in pick 6. And going back at the tape, some technical things that hard to see from a distance.
Yes.
When you have a chance to watch the film and rewind and go over and over, you see some things with the footwork you would want to clean up, but his ability to recover was still good. But then going back and watching Cushenberry, basically they were going back to back in Tuesday's practice in the reps, and it was almost like, okay, Steinberg was stoning on one hand, then Cushenberry, they were going back and forth. Cushenberry was so much more cleaner watching again on film where I was like, he's the guy who I wish I would have spotlighted along the offensive line there for the pick 6 segment.
I tell you what, I watched Cushenberry basically on the way down here. First of all, his length is really impressive. I would say he would be one of the winners from the weigh-in from a pure measurement standpoint because as a junior, because he's a redshirt junior, scouts didn't have real measurements on him coming into the season. So, he was listed, I think he was listed like 6'4", 310. He came in at 6'3 1/4, which is fine. 10.5-inch hands, big hands. 34.5-inch arms, 83-inch wingspan. Like, he's got that length that you want. And I thought that, really his ability to just drop his base and anchor down against a bull rush, I thought was really, really impressive. I thought he had a really good drill or a really good session that period. I would agree. The other guy, SEC, Jonathan Grenard, the defensive end from Florida. We'll talk about him a little bit later as well. Strung multiple moves together, showed some power. I talked about how he's got that base. We talked about that yesterday from the weigh-in measurements, and then got some reps of D tackle as well. So showing off that length, the ability to win inside with his quickness. I thought Jonathan Grenard had a good day on Tuesday as well. Let's go over to the other side. We watched O-line, D-line one-on-ones from the North team. To me, one of the guys that impressed, and I talked about him yesterday, was Matt Hennessy from Temple.
Yes.
There were a couple times where he tried to quick set people and get on them fast, and he lost. Strobridge was able to beat him with that quick move across his face and get in the backfield. What stood out most about Hennessy was his recovery, his ability to kind of unlock his hips, almost open at like a 45-degree angle, 50-degree angle, and get back in position where he was able to defend the quote-unquote quarterback. I thought that was really, really impressive. Hennessy showing off those feet and that range. I thought I was really, really impressed with him.
Speaking of Strobridge, who's also been very impressive here in Mobile, I asked Strobridge today, in fact, who the toughest player he's had to go against along the offensive line. And he pointed out Hennessy.
He's the only guy that stopped him on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Only guy that stopped him. And that showed up when we watched the one-on-one. Strobridge certainly stood out when we watched that on film. Again, multiple moves. I like guys that, because we talk about that with his pass rush plan. If I'm going to go, I'm not just going to be a robot and say, okay, I'm going to try my spin move or I'm going to try my rip move. And if I get blocked, I get blocked. If his rip move doesn't work, he's got a plan for how to counter that, and he counters it well. He counters it fast, and to me, like, you look at a guy like that. This is a guy that has a mind for rushing the passer, how to use his hands. He's not thinking as he's going; he's just going. It's natural. Jason Strobridge, I think, has been really impressive throughout the course of this week. Hakeem Adeniji was the guy that we didn't talk about yesterday. I'll tell you what, this kid was impressive, and particularly with his quick sets. I know that you said that stood out again today as well, but Hakeem Adeniji, when we say quick set, a lot of times you'll see offensive linemen, it's a vertical set where they have to change their sets up. You don't want to be predictable for defensive linemen so they can attack you from the way where they know you're going to be. But, when you look at Hakeem Adeniji, a number of times he would set almost horizontally and get into the defensive lineman very, very quickly, and it worked for him. He was able to get inside the chest of defenders really, really fast, and then he had the ability to recover. Even if I mentioned it earlier with Hennessy, the times he did get beat, he had the feet to recover. He played mostly guard throughout the course of practice as well. He played mostly tackle during his career with the Jayhawks. So position switch, still showing that natural ability to keep the quarterback upright. He played a little bit of center last spring before they moved him back to tackle. So showing off that versatility. Really good week so far for Hakeem Adeniji.
Going to spotlight him later on in the show. So
Beautiful. There we go.
I really don't want to give too much more away, but Adeniji, yes, is one of the players who has been very, very impressive. I'll just say it now. To me, when I went back to think about who would be my player of the day, Adeniji was a guy who I saw early on in practice, really caught my attention, and then going back through my notes and looking at some of the guys he was beating in one-on-one drills, I'm like, yeah, he's earning my tip of the cap there for today.
Love it.
So.
Yeah, he's had a good week, I think, so far. Let's go to Wisconsin edge player Zach Bond. I talked about how important his measurements were yesterday. Going back and watching the film, he's another guy where he's just stringing multiple moves together, and he's just so quick and sudden and violent with his hands. Zach Bond, who had played, was listed in the 220s coming into the season, came in around 240. And he's rushing the passer well. He's playing in coverage. He's playing off the ball, inside run drills. We're watching him as a weak side linebacker. There are a lot of people, they'll say, hey, if you can be an off-ball player early down and then go down the line of scrimmage and rush the passer on passing downs, that can go a long way. That's a position that we're seeing more and more around the NFL.
A similar player, this is more from watching today's practice.
Right.
Michigan, Josh Uche.
No question. Same kind of player.
Same kind of player, and you could see the types of moves where I felt more on Tuesday. I thought the offensive linemen were doing a much better job of being able to handle him, really not allowing Uche to utilize his power whatsoever. But today, you saw some of his ability to win high side.
Yep.
You saw some of that burst off the edge. You could see where a team might say, all right, he's not going to be maybe an every down edge rusher for you, but in certain situations, if you need that little bit of extra burst on the third down, this is a guy who could fit that mold for you.
Yeah, I'm excited to because Uche, and even in team drills, it seemed like he got home for what would have been a quote unquote sack.
Yep.
Obviously, no contact in these drills, but Uche, I thought had a good day where he flashed. Excited to go back on the film and watch him from Wednesday's practice. Last guy I thought that kind of showed up in these drills, Colton McKivitz, West Virginia, guy who played mostly right tackle over the course of his career for the Mountaineers. Just a workman-like player. And what stood out to me most was, there were a lot of times where people tried to take advantage of him oversetting and get inside him. And he showed the ability to react quickly and get back inside to defend his inside gap. I thought that overall McKivitz had a good day in the one-on-one periods on Tuesday.
I was going to say, in today's practice, Wednesday's practice, I watched McKivitz and said he doesn't have the flashy athleticism that makes you swoon, like the way I talked about Alex Taylor earlier.
Yes.
But I said Colton McKivitz just gets the job done.
He does.
Very workmanlike. And that's something that, you have the experience. It's something you bring to the table. It's a very critical factor to have. You just want a guy that gets the job done at the end of the day and looks the part while doing it. So completely agree with you there on McKivitz. Again, he's someone who I mentioned during practice. I was like, the McKivitz kid he's just winning his one-on-ones, just getting the job done, but nothing flashy, nothing spectacular. I thought you brought up a great point, the way that players would try to take advantage of him oversetting too far and working inside, but he finds a way to get the job done.
Yeah, I watched him last year because remember they had Yadni Kajust who was at this game.
Yes.
He was the left tackle. I liked McKivitz more watching them both. And, Kajust, I thought, some people had first round grades on as like a mock draft. In mock drafts, he was going in the first round. I didn't quite see that, and he ended up. I feel like he went in the third or fourth round. McKivitz, I think, is a little bit of a better player. We'll see where he ends up going in the spring, but a very interesting prospect nonetheless. We stayed on the same side for our last drill. North wide receiver DB one-on-ones, and I'll tell you what, man, the guy that stood out to me, we're going to hear from him later. Troy Pride, athletic kid, track background, had a number of pass breakups in that drill. Another one where he had really tight coverage on SMU wide receiver James Prochet. Pride's had a good week. He's put some days together here.
You point out, and this is something I talked to him about in the interview, is he's an extremely good athlete.
Yes.
Very, very good athlete. How do you allow yourself to not allow it to just make up for all the technical flaws potentially in your game? And he said that's something that he's continuing to work at, that he knows to be the best player possible, that it can't just be the raw athleticism, that he has to be a football player. And that's going to be something that teams are going to have to figure out with him, because the talent is obviously there. There was one rep during those one-on-ones that we watched where he was beat, but he has the recovery speed to make up for it. There was another rep that I remember you pointed out where the receiver got off the line quickly, and Pride was not as quick to react, but he has the recovery speed to make up for it. So there's going to be some coaching things there that teams will have to kind of figure out. But from a pure athleticism standpoint, he's flashed here this week. He's been consistent with it, and he has the mental makeup that you will want in a cornerback.
Every year, guys like him go in day two. Every year. At the cornerback position specifically, because teams are looking at corner. I say this every year. No position is drafted more often in the NFL draft than corner. Teams are looking for people that can cover wide receivers in today's game. And so I think when you look at his athletic profile, his size, he's not a tiny guy. He's got solid size across the board. I think Troy Pride is a guy we're going to see go in second, third round in this draft when it's all said and done. Another guy, this guy I was maybe a little bit more impressed with, KJ Hill from Ohio State. Every rep, he was doing something that made me go, man, that was really nice. Whether it was a really sharp release, maybe it was a couple of times where he did a really good job selling, whether it was on a comeback route or a dig, something something at the break point of a route where he would kind of just peek his eyes, take his eyes, look back at the quarterback, sell as if the ball was coming, even flash his hands sometimes, get the corner to break down before then just sticking his foot in the ground and breaking back towards where he was actually going, creating that separation, and then just really sharp hands at the catch point, was able to snatch the ball away from his frame. I thought KJ Hill looks really, really good in Tuesday.
A word that I have to describe him, filthy.
Yeah.
Just filthy with that route running ability. That just makes you want, just frustrates the heck out of a defensive back, because You don't know where the ball is going to be. He has the speed to be able to break off in any direction and the ability to cut on a dime to get to where he wants to go. It's a very, very difficult cover.
He's been one of the tougher covers, I think, all week. I 100% agree. Had a couple good flashes again today. Another guy that stood out to me, C-Mac, Alohi Gilman, the safety from Notre Dame. Look, we were seeing more safeties against receivers in these drills than I think we're used to seeing. We saw Alohi Gilman, we saw Jeremy Chin, we saw Josh Metellus, we saw a number of these guys, safeties working against receivers, and that's typically a mismatch. And for most of those guys, it was. But I thought Alohi Gilman did a nice job. I mean, he went really good man-to-man coverage against Texas A&M's Courtney Davis. Had a really physical press rep against Antonio Gandy Golden, where he got a pass breakup. Was able to impact the catch point and get the ball on the ground. Alohi Gilman, junior safety from Notre Dame, a transfer from Navy, has done a really nice job this week.
I remember he was one of the guys who I wrote down as sort of the honorable mention for Pick 6 yesterday, where I was like, he had a couple of reps that really stood out, and I think you brought up those reps just now, and it just kind of watching again on film really cemented the fact that, he had a pretty darn good day.
Yeah.
Did get injured in today's practice.
That's a good point. Yes, he did.
Was injured in today's practice, unfortunately. So
at least he did walk it off, thankfully.
Yes, walked it
we
off.
were a little worried early on.
But so disappointing to see because he's put up the first practice and a half or so.
Yep.
Really, really strong. Liked what I've seen from Gilman.
Yeah, Michael Pittman was another player. I thought the one route was outstanding, where he just did. It was a dig route where he was able to just kind of sell his eyes and shoulders as if he was going to break towards the corner, and the cornerback defending him completely went outside as if he was going to go outside. Then he, just used his outside foot, broke back in. Really, really good route from Michael Pittman, who, I've talked with a couple of these corners, C-Mac, and the guys that have faced him, people in the Pac-12, some guys that, some other schools, guys that have seen him already in practice, and they just say, he's a big kid, but he gets in and out of breaks really well, and he moves better than you would think for a guy his size, which you're going to need that at the NFL level. You can't just be a big kid who can't run. And I think when you look at Michael Pittman, he's certainly got some of the physical tools you're looking for.
I don't know what he came in at officially. He's listed 6'4", 220, and he's a very good route runner. It's not what you would expect. Usually, I remember, I don't know if you heard the Eagles Insider podcast presented by Lincoln Financial Group.
Of course.
Between Dave Spadaro and Harold Carmichael.
Of course.
And Harold explained that because of his 6'8" frame, he had to run routes a little differently.
Yeah.
You get to the same spot, it's just a different way of getting there.
Sure.
And you would think of someone in Pittman's frame, especially when you have guys like Prochet, who are, very good crafty route runners, Van Jefferson from Florida also. But Pittman's right up there with those guys. Troy Pride talks about Pittman later on in the show about how difficult he is.
Yeah.
And he's had plenty of experience covering him.
No question. Playing him every
going
year.
back to the Notre Dame USC rivalry. So, and that's just continued here this week at the Senior Bowl. So it's incredible because when you watch him move, you're not thinking that he's 6'4". He's looking like a 6 foot, 6'1" type guy. You're like 6'4", like. All right.
Well, let's go.
Something to work with here, exactly.
The last guy I wanted to mention to you was just Jordan Love. A couple of the balls were right where they needed to be, and then a couple of them were really thrown very, very early. The big knock you'll hear for quarterbacks coming into this event, going to the combine workout, the ball's got to come out. Even though it might look bad if you're throwing it to a spot and the receiver's not there, the timing's not there, we want to see you throw with anticipation. Get the ball out before the receiver goes out of his break. There were times, I think it was with KJ Hill, I believe, on a route at the top of the screen, far side of the field.
Yes.
He threw a comeback route where the ball was out. He didn't even start the break yet. I mean, it was really, really good anticipation. And it was a nice catch by KJ Hill because he turned and the ball was on him fast. And he was able to pull it in. So Jordan Love, good stuff. And he had a couple nice throws today. I got to watch a little bit more of Jordan Love today live than I did yesterday. But watching him on tape this morning, I thought he showed up well.
I watched him live yesterday, and the first thing I said was the anticipation. And I just remember last week when we were at the Shrine Bowl in Tampa, I was like,
we didn't see that.
Just give. It was frustrating because you have guys like John Hightower who have a little bit of speed. Some of these receivers you want to see make these plays, and you're like, just give the guy just throw it in an area where they can make a chance.
Right.
Give me, I don't know if these quarterbacks are going to have a chance at the next level, but let's see if the pass catchers can do something here. So to Jordan's credit, I mean, great opportunity for him this week. Again, Joe Burrow not being here. Jordan Love has a good chance to make case for why he should be a first-round pick, and throwing with anticipation definitely something you want to see. It reminds me of what we saw from Daniel Jones
Right.
a year ago,
No
who
doubt.
ended up going number 6 to the Giants.
Anyone else stand out for you for the receiver DBs?
From yesterday, no. As
Okay.
I'm literally going through, you pretty much hit.
We hit the big ones.
We hit all the ones that I wanted to touch on there.
All right,
so.
well, let's get to the guys that stood out to us today. It's time for Pick 6.
Now it's time for Pick 6.
All right, C-Mac. Well, let's get into, like I said, the guys that stood out to us today. We're going to pick 6 players, 3 for you, 3 for me. Who are the guys that stood out most to us today in our live viewing of practice? South team went first. Or no, North team went first. South team went second.
Yes.
The opposite of yesterday. I'll let you go first again. Who's the first name?
I'm going to start this by literally had 2 names written. You took the one who I didn't think you would take, believe it or not,
Who's that?
Stephon Sullivan, the
Oh,
tight
yeah.
end from LSU.
He had a good day.
So you'd watch more. I'm trying to think back here now. I remember watching him routes on air,
Yep.
and just a big body, easy mover. Like we talked about him on the preview podcast.
He's a receiver. I mean, he was a receiver at LSU. He's
Yeah.
a backup receiver.
Yeah,
Has never
and-
played tight end.
and he's a guy who's making the transition to can he block in line,
Yep.
but be sort of like what I would expect Chase Claypool
Yes.
to be basically.
He moves better than Claypool.
A very, very smooth, easy move. It's enjoyable to watch. And so I was like, okay, he's one of my guys. And when you point him out, I'm like, because you even asked me at one point during practice, because it's spelled,
Spell Steven.
Steven.
P-H-E-N.
and I actually spoke with Stephon during media day. First thing he goes, it's Stephon.
There you go.
I'm like, all right.
I had one of those today. I talked with Devon Hamilton, the defensive tackle from Ohio State, and I called him Davon. He's like, hold on. And he just got done an interview with Big Ten Network, and he said I had to do it with this guy too. It is Devon. I was like, Devon, I'm glad you told me.
Exactly, yes.
Now I
exactly.
know.
So I'll let you get more into Sullivan Day, some
Okay.
of your guys, okay? Another guy that you have that you stole from me too, who I would have picked as my top 3. But we talked about Hakeem Adeniji
Yes.
earlier in the podcast. And going back to the one-on-one drills, 3 guys here who he beat: Jason Strobridge from North Carolina, McTelvin Najim from Arkansas, a Shrine Bowl call-up, and Neville Gallimore.
Nice.
So
That's good. That's a good trio right there.
Good trio right there. So, again, one of those guys when you just looked, he looked like he was just winning every time he was out there on the field pretty
Yeah.
much. Dominant in those one-on-ones, not giving up any ground. Just very, very impressed with what I've seen from him. So I know we talked a little bit about him.
Did you do more of the quick setting today? I'm interested when we go back in the film room
that's-
tomorrow.
Yeah, because it's something you brought up as we were watching Hennessy, especially the Temple Center. How are the players going to react to it? Does it become a little bit later when
Those guys are watching film. They're watching film tonight.
When I talk with Troy Pride, I say, does this become a thing where you go against like a James Prochet, multiple reps over the course of a day? Do you start to say, all right, I'm expecting this. This is what he looks like off the ball, off the snap, if he's going to go this way. Does it become a cat and mouse chess game? And he said that's what it's all about. So it'll be interesting to see the tape tomorrow, how these defensive players react differently to what they saw from day one from the offensive linemen.
Yeah, no question. Well, I'll jump into Stephon Sullivan since you brought him up. And I think when you look at Stephon Sullivan, the big thing I wanted to see is how is this transition to tight end going? And one of the drills that I watched with that South squad was the running backs and tight ends going up against the linebackers and safeties. And they start with pass rush drills, so blitzing, pass protection, and then they go to pass coverage, so the receivers running routes and the defenders trying to cover them. So I expected Sullivan to do really well in the latter portion, but I'll tell you what, in the former, he had some nice plays. He got a defender on the ground, showed some willingness, showed some toughness, showed some effort. I thought Stephon Sullivan showed up pretty well as a blocker in those individual drills. Excited to kind of see what he looks like in the team periods when we watch the film back, but I thought Sullivan showed well as a blocker, and then he made some plays down the field today. One-on-one drills, he blew by some defenders, got some separation down the field against linebackers and safeties. He had some big catches in team periods as well that I know we both noted. 7-on-7, I believe he had a nice catch. So Sullivan showed up. He had a good day today.
So I'll go with a pass catcher here for my second guy, Colin Johnson out of Texas.
Okay.
Big body receiver, about 6'6", let's
He's a
say
big boy.
6'6", 220.
Yeah.
One of the best plays of the day in the wide receiver DB one-on-ones. It was a throw over the top from Jalen Hurts where he beat Dane Jackson from Pittsburgh. Very physical corner. Johnson also used that big body to shield off a defender on a slant route to come down with a reception. So he's a guy who these first couple days, nothing like that makes you not so many wow plays except for that catch down the field from Hurts, but just consistently making plays time after time again. So I figure give a little tip of the cap here in pick 6.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the throw from Jalen Hurts. I forgot the last play of the day from the North squad was, or from the South squad, I should say, was Jalen Hurts to Stephon Sullivan, sail route, 3-level stretch, perfectly placed ball from Jalen. Probably the best ball I've seen from Jalen Hurts all week. Perfectly placed. Sullivan was able to reel it in along the sideline. I'm glad you mentioned Hurts' name. That made me remember that throw. My second one, I'm going to go back to those drills, those running backs and tight ends against the linebackers and safeties. Darius Anderson, the running back from TCU. I've made the comparison over the last few weeks to a guy like Chase Edmonds, who out of Fordham, now with the Arizona Cardinals. Dynamic playmaker. We saw the speed today. We saw the ability to win as a route runner, so he can make catches in open space. As a blocker, I liked him too. I liked his effort on film. That carried over to the practice field. I thought he did a nice job in pass protection drills today. And then ran the ball as well. Had a couple of nice runs where he was untouched getting up to the second, third level. So Darius Anderson, the running back from TCU, I thought had a strong outing today.
I like that. My last one, we talked about him a lot here. And even though he lost to Adeniji on the 1 rep, that's Jason Strobridge out of North Carolina. You talked about the pass rush plan that he has. His hand usage, very impressive for someone coming out of college. During the TE, really shined in the team drills. Had a couple pass breakups at the line of scrimmage. Had got in the backfield for what would have been a sack. Just overall, again, he still performed well in the one-on-one drills outside of the 1 rep against Adeniji. But to me, Strobridge, someone who through these first 2 days has been very impressive. Has stacked a couple nice days here together.
So a couple honorable mentions for me. I say a couple. It's a few more than a couple. All right. So Troy Pride, another strong day. Had a couple nice flashes. Bradley Anai had a couple should have been sacks. There was the one play you and I both saw him where he flew into the backfield. It should have been a sack. Blew past.
Anai's probably the next on my list here for pick 6. So
Anai,
good call there.
Anai, absolutely. You mentioned Strobridge. Michael Pittman, I thought had some nice catches today. Did great in blocking drills. Hunter Bryant, the tight end from FAU, the John Mackey Award winner, really good day. Blocking as well as pass catching. I thought he did a really, really nice job. Kyle Duggar, the Lenore Ryan safety,
couple plays,
really nice interception in one-on-one drills where he kind of showed the ability, the instincts in man-to-man coverage. I thought he had a strong outing in that drill. Jonathan Grenard and Jabari Zuniga. What was interesting about watching those guys in one-on-ones, we think of Zuniga as the power rusher, and we think of Grenard as the speed rusher. Both guys won the opposite way in this drill. I thought we saw some power from Grenard, and I thought we saw some speed, the ability to win high side from Zuniga, and I thought that was really interesting. Brandon Barch had a couple of really good reps again, so excited to see that in the film room tomorrow. Akeem Davis-Gaither, the linebacker from App State, made some plays in team periods, and then Antonio Gibson had a couple of nice plays and a couple. Man, like he out of the backfield ran some wheel routes and blew by the linebacker, blew by the safety. And the quarterbacks just underthrew him a couple times and just missed him. But so it could have been some big plays left on the field there for Gibson. But
big boy at running back, by the way.
He is
6'1",
6'1" and change. Yep.
Almost 6'2". He's a big guy, but very intriguing with that like running back, wide receiver versatility.
Mainly a receiver. I mean, he was in the receiver room all throughout his career for Memphis, but played a lot of running back as well, and they see him as a running back. And I don't blame him. Look, the guy averaged 15 yards per offensive touch this year. I mean, big play threat without question.
Josh Kelly also has some nice flashes.
He made Troy Pride look bad in a team period. Really good shake in the hole. Josh Kelly had some nice plays today. I agree.
Benjamin, I thought he did a good job being able to get on the edge, flash the ability catching the football. I think that was something he wanted to prove coming this week, that he could stay on the field on third down. So a couple, I like that you brought up the running backs there. So to kind of give them some love here.
Yeah. So a bunch of guys stood out. Excited to kind of dive into the film with you tomorrow as we go over to the Player Hotel and take some of that in. All right. Teased it earlier. It's time for
wait. You didn't give your third guy.
Yeah, I gave my third, and we went Stephon. Oh, you're right. I did miss my third. All right.
Because you wanted to go honorable mention, and you're like, roll this laundry list. Because it's a guy that you stole from me. That's why.
All right. So
that's why.
My third guy was Denzel Mims, the wide receiver from Baylor.
Jeez.
This guy, he made some big plays today. And look, when you watch him on film, you see the flashes. I wanted to see it more consistently, and I thought in the film room today he did some good stuff from Tuesday's practice. And today he made some of the biggest catches of the day. Went up and over a defender to catch a pass from Jordan Love today down the field, and everybody was like the big ooh-ah play from the day. He made some nice play, and as a blocker, he did some good things in one-on-one drills. I thought Denzel Mims had a good afternoon. I'm excited to kind of dive into the film of that tomorrow.
And then Mims is going to come up in our unofficial visit here.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Good call.
Catching up with Troy Pride from Notre Dame, talking about the chess match going against these receivers on a daily basis, what it was like playing in such a big-time program like Notre Dame where you're in the national spotlight week in and week out. And it's something that I actually mentioned to you, Fran, that he was in a car accident. Fortunately, there were nothing significant in terms of injuries on his part. His father, I think, had to have shoulder surgery as a result of it. But fortunately, outside of that, everyone came out unscathed. And what that did to him, personally, and just from looking at, his football career from a big picture view as a result of that. So we get into all that and more in today's unofficial visit.
The unofficial visit.
Troy, first thing, one of the things I've absolutely loved these first 2 days of Senior Bowl practices are the battles between you and Prochet there on the outside. How would you characterize those one-on-one matchups?
He's a great receiver. He at his prospective school, SMU, he did a lot of great things, and our battles are sacred to this field. It's an amazing opportunity to compete against amazing athletes, and he was just another one that I knew I had to play different techniques. I knew I had to be a little bit more technically sound, be a little bit more savvy with him because I know he's quick in and out of his breaks. He's got good feet. He's got a good body control. So with that, I just had to step up to the challenge. That's what it was.
When you go against someone over and over again, do you get to the point where you say to yourself, all right, what's he going to do this time? How do I counteract? Does it become a chess match, so to speak, out here on the field?
It's absolutely chess. Football out here, that's what it is. You got to mix up your techniques. You can't be one-dimensional. Now, you can perfect techniques, but, having multiple tools in your tool bag are good to play different guys. I wouldn't play James Prochet the same way I play Chase Claypool or Michael Pittman. I wouldn't play them the same every single time. So with that, I got my toolbox ready, and I'm shooting my gun.
You mentioned your boy Chase Claypool out there. How weird is it going against him all these years in practice and now doing it out here as you're beginning your NFL careers?
Well, it's always been a battle at practice. He's a great receiver in his own regard. So, it's just once again competing. It's just, being here, being in this ambiance, being, so grateful and blessed to be here and just competing. It's football, so at the end of the day, that's all it is.
Through 2 days, who would you say is the toughest receiver you've gone against on this field? We talked about Prochet a lot. You mentioned Pittman, who is another crafty route runner. Claypool has that size. Which one of your teammates, though, would you say is the toughest battle for you individually?
Goodness, Mims from Baylor caught a deep ball on me earlier today. Didn't like that. So I think he's got the one up right now. But there's nobody I can just pinpoint or point out. So many great dudes out here. They do different stuff. KJ Hill is running smooth through in and out of his routes. Fast guy that can move. So it's just a lot of dudes that are good. So I can't, like I said, I'm glad they're on my team.
Troy, with that athleticism that you bring to the table, how do you have to push yourself to make sure that you improve the technique, that you don't just rely on that athleticism out here on the field?
Every day, that's what it is. I would not reach my full potential if it wasn't for me working through my technique. Because God gives you different talents and gifts, but it's the hard work that you put in with that creates something really special, and that's what I'm attempting to do each